Well, going to our next speaker here this morning, and he will set the scene for the next group of presentations around auditor communication. Myles Thompson is chairman of the FEE Audit and Assurance Policy Group, and I would like to invite Mr. Thompson to the stage, and I would like you to give him a big hand. And there he is. Myles Thompson.
Good morning, everybody, and I know I'm keeping you from your coffee, so I will be as brief as I can. I'm going to do a brief thing on auditor communication when we come back from coffee, but what I really wanted to cover here was just introduce you about the discussion paper that FEE issued in 2014 on the future of audit and assurance. This was a key project that FEE undertook last year, and we're still in the process of gaining feedback, and this conference is part of that process. So I just wanted to give you some highlights and ask you some questions. So what was the objective? Well, the objective was about trying to question everything we do, everything that the audit profession is known for. And I think we heard yesterday all about that we need to change. And I think that was a key theme throughout, the paper was, well, what did we need to change? How do we deal with big data? How do we deal with shared service centers? How do we deal with speed? Some of the, a lot of the points that were raised yesterday in our sort of technology session. But also, how do we be innovative? And you saw yesterday also some of the areas that were in that technology session. But also change is not just about, in my perspective, the audit profession changing. I think the regulators need to change. The regulators also need to embrace this change. They need to understand that we can get sufficient audit evidence from data and analytics. So they need to embrace the changes and what we need to do to change our profession. And also, I'd like to say the standard setters need to change as well. And I think Arnold mentioned this morning, that the ISSB had a session on data and analytics. And standard setting needs to come along with this change, with us, to make sure that it is up to date. For example, if you test 100% of the population, do you need to test controls? So we need to make sure that those things are kept in line. We just had a long session about audit quality, and of course audit quality is very important, but also quality of corporate reporting, and I think that was also mentioned this morning as well, that is a very important area that we need to get right. But the most important thing for me is making sure we're relevant, making sure we are doing what is relevant to our stakeholders. And we heard yesterday about some certain areas, and we'll come on to that in a minute, but we need to make sure that we're engaging with our stakeholders, not just in audit reporting, but also in other areas. What do they want? What do they need? So the discussion continues. We received about 30 comment letters from across, stakeholders, but we do need input, more input, and as I mentioned, we want to get, input from this conference. And the plan is that we will take what we've received to date, what we get from here, and we will be developing some more discussion papers, more position papers, trying to take this journey going forward, trying to move forward in what we think are the key areas. And I know that it was mentioned about, a lot of the questions that weren't picked up today or weren't answered, but actually they will be very useful in helping us formulate, where do we need to move forward in this area. So it is all about audit quality, and I know that we've really covered all this, and I think the quotes that I've put up here really just mirror what we discussed earlier. Though I would like to mention that whilst I can fully agree that it is very difficult to measure, I think we need to try and move forward in that area somehow, because I think it is something that everyone is looking for. But I fully agree that it's not just black and white. You can't just say that partner's had a lot of audit training, so he is much better than that partner. It just doesn't work like that. So we'll need to work through this area, and I know there is a lot of work going on inside the firms, inside the ISSB, the Centre for Audit Quality, and as Mr. Doty said yesterday, the PCAOB. But it is, I think this is an area that we do really need to move forward on. Then meeting stakeholders' needs. These quotes here, I think, very much mirror what was said yesterday about we need to do more outside the audit. And it's very interesting to see, well, what is that? What do people want? And I think you get differing views. We talked yesterday about the value for money, how that could fit in as part of audit. People always talk about, we should give assurance on the front half of the financial statements. Though interesting, in the US, they've had management discussion and analysis for years and years. And there's been an auditing standard that's been in place for years and years, and no one's ever used it because no one's really required that assurance over that area. So it is something I think we need to work with our stakeholders to see, well, what is relevant and what is needed. And in this light, I was going to try and ask you a question, if that's all right, on the Bub Master, just to get your initial reactions to the question about, do you think there should be assurance on the over forward-looking information? I think it's like turkeys voting for breakfast, or for Christmas, sorry. But anyway. I think this probably mirrors a bit of what was yesterday as well with the value for money question, but I think we would always say here that, yes, we think there should be assurance, but I think we need to make sure that our stakeholders, the market, investors, users, do want this assurance. And I'm not sure that that is always the case, but I think we'll need to see as we go forward. Okay, shall we move on? I think the other area that we did look at in the paper was the needs of SMEs, and it is something that we specifically haven't got a session on in this conference, so that's why I was wanting to bring it up here. And I think it was mentioned yesterday about the skill sets. Do you need different skill sets? And I completely agreed, actually, with the person saying that whilst it's much more complicated to audit a big group and you need certain other skills, the actual basic audit skills are the same. But I do think there are different services that need to be offered to SMEs. And so I think it's something that we need to see, do we have that suite of services that is, applicable, that's right for the needs of these small enterprises? Also, there's always been the topic about our auditing standards, needed. Do we need different auditing standards to adapt to needs? And there are different debates, and it may be worth understanding what is happening in, some regions in Europe about this. So I may be picking on somebody later. But it's, it is something that I know the IAASB have been looking at and thinking, well, are auditing standards, applicable, and the audit regulations that have come up have said that they need to be, scalable for the small entities. And that picks up my last point. So I think this is an area that we do need to think further about. It's easy to say that auditing standards, are being enhanced and everything like that. And a lot of what we talked about, audit quality, professional skepticism, covers all audits. But of course, the regulators who are pushing a lot of this are really interested in our PIE audits. So we need to, get that balance of what is right for PIEs and what is also right for our SME community. So I have one more question for you on this. And this is a bit of maybe a provocative question. Is there a need to consider new alternatives to statutory audits for SMEs?
Would you like to see who says no?
I gave him is this working? Yeah. I gave him a bit of warning, but I know Jens has been working on something in the Nordic regions on this very area. So do you want to give us a quick...
Well, can you hear me? Great. Well, thank you very much, Myles. I'm not quite sure whether it fits in exactly with the columns that, or the question that you have up there, because what we're looking at actually is not so much whether there is an alternative to statutory audits, but whether we can do the audit in a better way, irrespective of whether it happens to be statutory requirement or whether it happens to be a voluntary audit. And basically what we're looking at is, can we do an audit of a small, less complicated entity in a more effective manner while still maintaining the highest possible quality and still within the framework of an audit as an audit? And that is what we're looking at.
I think a lot of people would like to understand how you're doing that. Anybody on the no side here that the SMEs, that there is no alternatives? Actually, it's much closer than I thought it was going to be. Anybody willing to admit they're going to admit no? Maybe we should move on.
I think back to the slides, if that's... Again, we talked about technology and skills yesterday, and for me, especially technology is an area that I think scares probably the majority of this audience, because I think we had this question at the beginning, you know, how long have you been in the audit profession? And most of us are 20 years plus. And I think then technology is not our natural comfort zone. We all seem to, you know, rely on our children to be able to work on DVR or our computer or anything like that. So I do think technology is an area that scares a lot of us. Though I think we saw yesterday in that technology session, you know, a number of the areas that, you know, great areas that, you know, can be done in this field. But what it does bring to me is that we do need different skill sets. And it was touched on a bit yesterday, you know, about the different skills, you know, and it's, you know, it's interesting, the concept now of having, you know, just an audit team that's just full of, you know, qualified auditors is probably not going to work in the future. And I know more and more we bring in IT specialists and everything like that. But I mean, that's got to change, and that model has got to change. And it's something that we can't ignore. It's there now. And how we develop and how we change in this area, I think, is going to be very important. And how we change our models, you know, our recruitment pieces. We talked about recruitment, about graduates. And we are very lucky in the UK that we don't have to just recruit, you know, people who've done auditing and accounting at university. We can recruit people who've done, you know, IT degrees or chemical engineering like I did. And things like that actually are very important to get this broader sense. But it's something that I want to now, just my last question really to ask you lot is, you know, what do you think is the key skills? So I think it's, you know, it's going to be a cloud piece. So really, what do you think are the key skills that are needed? If I'm reading these correctly, it seems very interesting, and I don't think anyone's put IT up there at all. I need my glasses. I think everyone's coming back to the phrases that we had before about business understanding, you know, skepticism. It's very interesting. Business understanding seems to be the biggest, which I would fully agree with, though I wonder how we're going to, you know, gel that in with some of the IT skills that I do believe we need going forward. Interesting. Something we'll take away, and as I mentioned right at the front, this is part of the process and how we're going to build this into follow-on papers from FEE. So can I go back just to the last piece? Okay. And just sort of the last area, auditor communication. And these are just some quotes that came through our responses. I don't propose that we'll cover this area now because this is going to be the key part that we're going to deal with after the break. But this, again, I think is, and I think we'll see that in the presentations that we have later, one of the key areas that is required to show how we can change, how we can get closer to the users and everything like that. And Arnold explained very well what the IWSB has been doing in this area. And so I think we'll come back and talk more about this after the break. So I will plan to stop there. And do you want to get rid of everybody?
Well, thank you so much for this great talk, great questions, great word cloud. And as you said, we will see you just after the coffee break, because then you will do an introduction on the next cluster of speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 20-minute coffee break, and we will see you back here in this conference room at 20 past.